Okay, so I now have a piece of fabric that I'm just going to give another press to, because I don't think I pressed it very well, because my interfacing doesn't look like it's attached particularly well. And I'm doing this in one piece of fabric, because trying to do each of those little diamonds in a different fabric will be quite a challenge. So I think if you want to try it, then feel free. But I feel that that's probably, it's just too much. So I'm going to get some spray glue, and I'm just going to find a piece of paper to put behind my work. That'll do. When we use spray glue, if you do it straight onto your table, you're going to find you've got a sticky table. So just a little drop of spray glue on the wrong side of your panel, and then you can pop it over your fabric. Now I've interfaced this fabric because I wanted, it wants to be relatively stable. I've cut my piece of fabric bigger than I needed, and that's fine. I can trim off any excess. So I've now positioned my fabric underneath my exterior panel, and this is where things get different. Now, if you want to add your foam at this point, you can do. I'm not adding foam because this is really thick faux leather, and if I add foam, I'll never be able to sew it. So I'm just going to work without the foam. So what we're going to do is we're going to quilt, but we're going to quilt in a slightly different way. So I'm going to start with a line that is 1/8 of an inch away from the very, well, let's get rid of these. I've got all these little diamond bits here. I just need to shift those. I'm going to make a line that is 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of my triangle. Now, if you don't think you can stitch in a straight line, mark up with chalk. If you don't think you can stitch on a chalk line, then you can use masking tape as a guide. So you could do a line of masking tape along so that you're literally sewing on the edge of the masking tape. But I am going from right the way across the entire panel. So let me just see if you can see that. I hope you can. It's coming all the way down here, and I am just going to stitch along that line, and I'm going to use a 3 1/4 sized stitch. Now I'm not going to back stitch at the beginning or the end, because that's going to come straight off of the edges of my my work. And I'm using a similar coloured thread to my faux leather. If you want to do something that contrasts or goes with the fabric that you've got behind your faux leather, that's fine. So that's my first line of stitching done, and I'm just going to remove my chalk marks, because they do tend to I get a bit confused by them if I've got too many on there at one time. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the other long side of this triangle design that we've got. Probably be easier with a longer ruler actually, but so 1/8 of an inch. And again, I'm going to stitch all the way down that line. I'm sorry, I'm not sure you can actually see me there. I'll just turn that round slightly. think that's better. I think my camera's moved slightly. I'm using a Teflon foot and I have a size 14 needle in here. Don't need anything bigger at this point because I'm not going through masses of layers. I'm going through one layer of faux leather, one layer of fabric and one layer of interfacing, so it doesn't need to be a massive needle at this point. It's a great exercise in sewing straight lines, which is a skill, an absolute skill. And now I am going to mark a line that's on that first line of my sort of trellis that's centrally. Now that is only a very narrow piece of faux leather, so do be careful. And again, carry on right up to the side. And I'm going to stitch along that line, so you can kind of see where we're going now. Now when you're going along those bits between the sort of the trellis marks, do keep in mind that you don't want to fall off the edges, so go nice and slowly. If necessary, use a stiletto or a, I don't even know what I've done with mine. That's a seam rip, I don't need that end. A stiletto to stop this from stretching, because these are quite thin pieces of faux leather. Sorry, I've gone quiet because I'm concentrating. Once you've come off the other end, just continue on your line all the way to the very edge of your fabric. Get rid of the chalk. And we're just going to continue to do that all the way across our design. So if you think you can eyeball it, feel free to do so. I'm not convinced about eyeballing straight lines. A shorter straight line I might have a go at, but a longer one like this, not convinced. Now in an ideal world, I'll just move my presser foot because it's swiveled round a little bit underneath my desk. Now if you're going to put foam in, you can either put it in beforehand, which will give you a slightly puffier look to this. It will, however, make staying on these narrow bits of this trellis quite difficult because you'll get the puffiness of the foam, which will push you off. I quite like, say, because this is very thick faux leather, I won't be using foam in this one anyway. I probably won't actually use it in any additional stabiliser other than the woven in on my lining. remove the chalk. And you can see where we're going with this. And once we've finished doing all the ones this way, in this direction, we're then going to do the ones going in the other direction in exactly the same way. This one, because it's a much shorter line, I'm just going to go eyeballing. So if you feel confident just not putting the markings on, then don't bother. But for the first ones where you've got those really long lines, I would always suggest that you mark them, because if you start off wonky, you're never going to get it straight again. There we go. So that's all of these lines done. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to do the other angle. And again, because this is a longer line, I'm going to mark it with my chalk marker, just so that I know that I'm straight. And remember, keep your stitch nice and even. It's not a race. This will be much better if you do it slowly. Don't feel intimidated by it though. This is just faux leather and fabric. It's not gonna, you can do it. It's not as difficult as it looks. You just need to be slow and controlled with your foot pedal. The next one. next one, see, it's just straight lines. This is great practice for doing straight lines. And people say curves are difficult, but actually straight lines are much more difficult because every deviation from a straight line shows. You know, just so I keep lifting my foot. When I get to where the next line of trellis goes the other way, sometimes the little Teflon-y bit on the bottom of my foot catches on it and pushes it along. So it kind of pushes it out of shape. So I just need to raise my foot to make sure it doesn't catch on it. This is what happens when you buy a generic, fairly cheap Teflon foot, but it's the difference between £3 or £4 and £30 or £40. We're just going to carry on. I'll just finish doing this and then I'll show you what we've got, and you can see that the finished effect is really quite interesting. Not sure whether you'd class this as cutwork or a plique. Cutwork's usually stitched around the outside and then left with nothing in the back, but because we don't want to see the lining through the exterior, that would be really rather unpleasant. This is a plique, but it's a plique with a quilting type technique and a bit of all sorts, so I like to mix and match. I'm calling it cutwork because I can, really. No other reason than that. Go, and then you could have trimmed off the excess fabric prior to doing the stitching. I tend to not, but I'm just going to trim off any excess fabric you have from your piece that you put underneath. I was going to say underlay, but that's what you get on carpets and probably not the right word. And there we have one very beautiful piece of, still got chalk all over it. I tend to use a baby wipe to remove the chalk off the thingy because it kind of gets stuck into where the needle holes are. So you get kind of a white residue where all the needle holes are. So a little tiny bit of baby wipe or a damp cloth will just remove, excuse me, any of that. Get rid of any threads as well, because we all know how much I love a thread. Oh. And there we have it. And you can do one on one side or you can do one on both sides, so you've got that, you end up with this diamond effect. It's very much up to you. Or you could do them at the top, you could do them on both sides of each panel. I just think it's really cool. If you wanted to, you could even I don't know where my template's gone. You could even one down here if you wanted to, but you'd have to do that before you did your, you could put them up there before you did any of your stitching, because you'd need to make sure that your stitching was right. So you could put one at the top, one on either side. It's very, very much your call. You have a triangle design that you can use any way you want. If you wanted to make the whole triangle smaller, just cut that small part out rather than the whole thing. You could cut just like the 4 rows rather than 1, 2, however many rows there are. Use it, take it, use it, enjoy it, make it your own.